The first step to warping the loom is making sure that your name is on it in the top left-hand corner. Please use a pencil. You're going to grab your warp string, and we need to place that warp string in the top left-hand notch, the top left-hand corner of your loom. Make sure you leave about 2 to 3 inches of that warp string, enough so that you can tie it later. Now bring your warp all the way down to the bottom notch and back around to the back side. Now you're going to hop over to the one directly next to it, bring it back down, around, and up to that notch that you first left from. You're going to follow this pattern for the entire time that you are warping the loom. A good way to make sure that you are doing it right is if you have the same amount of warp strings on both sides of your loom. So you follow the pattern of hop, down, around, and over for the rest of your loom. Hop, down, around, over. Hop, down, around, and at the end. At the end, you should have 7 warp strings on both sides of the loom, and make sure you leave enough of that warp string on there, 2 to 3 inches, to make sure that you can tie it off at the end. Next, you are going to get your weft. You want it to be 2 wingspans long. After you get 2 wingspans of yarn, you need to tie your warp string to your weft string. You want to make sure that your little hops are at the top of your loom, and then you go down to the bottom left corner of your warp string, and you use your weft and you tie those 2 together. And just like you're tying a simple knot, like you're tying your shoes, make a loop, put one through the loop, and pull. And then we'll do a double knot just to be sure it's secure. Make an X, put it through the loop, and pull. Okay, so this is going to get our weaving started. Now you want to leave about 1 inch on there so you can cut it off if it's too long. But then you take your other end, and this is where your needle comes in. You want to thread the yarn through the eye of the needle. Tie it on with not a double knot, but just 1 square knot, just so it stays in place. Then you start weaving. It doesn't matter how you start. You can consider your knot an over or an under, but that's the pattern we're going to follow, is over, under, over, under, over, under. So if I start out with my knot being an over, then I need to go under my warp. And then I go over this one, and then I'll go under this one, under, over, under, over. Here it is so you can see the pattern. Over, under, over, under, over, under, over. And then I'll pull that through. So now on this front side, I've got over, under, over, under, over, under, over. We are making a pouch, so we want to weave on both sides of the cardboard. But because of our number of warps, we need to make sure that when we do the turn, we count that as an over or under. So I've got over, under, over, under, over, under, over. The turn is an under. So I'm going to go again over, under, over, under, over, under, and over. When you do the next turn, you don't have to remember an over or under. That's only important on the first turn. An easy trick is to just look at whatever you have on the bottom. You need to make sure that your weave that you're actively working on is opposite of the one directly below it. So if this is an over, under, over, under, you want it to be opposite. So you want it to be under, over, under, over. So our knot, we said, was an over. So this is going to be under, over, under, over, under, over, under. If I pull that through, now you should get a good visual of how these are opposite. So if we look at our black warp and our pink weft, this bottom one, my pink weft, is under my warp on this first layer. The one right above it is over the black warp. So this one's over and this one's under. This one's under and this one's over. This one's over and this one's under. You need to keep that same pattern going. Over, under, over, under, over, under, and make sure it is opposite of the one below it for your entire pouch. When you get a few layers up, make sure you're squishing your weft down all the way to the bottom. A good way to check to make sure you are pushing your weft down enough is if you do not see the color of your warp anymore. So if I look on this pouch, I can no longer see my black warp through my weft weaving. When you get to the end and you need some more string, first thing you have to do is take your needle off, and then you go grab another 2 wing spans of yarn. You can get a new color or the same color. It's totally up to you. But then you just tie one end of the string to the other with a simple square knot. Double knot if you want to, but I usually just do 1 knot. Now you have a new long piece of string, and you need to tie your needle to the new end. And then you can continue weaving. When you get closer to the top of your loom, you want to fit as many shots as possible all the way up to the top. This last little bit is the most difficult, but you want to fit in as many as you possibly can, and you want to make sure that you cannot see your warp strings at all. Okay, when you get to the very end on your pouch, what you need to do is you need to tie off, just like we did when we started, tie your weft to your warp. You want to tie a knot right where your warp and weft meet. So I'm going to go underneath my warp, start to make a loop. And I'll put my needle through that loop and start to make one square knot. Pull it. I'll do that one more time just so it stays in place. Under my warp, starting to make a loop. I'll put my needle through that loop and pull for the square knot. Okay, so I am going to cut off this extra string. Leave about 1.5 inches to 2 inches. Now I need to remove my jumps up at the top. So every time we hopped over, it created a little loop. So we want to push off those loops from the top of your pouch. Once you have undone your loops from the top, you should have one piece that is not a loop. So this was the beginning of our loom. This little piece, since it's not a loop, needs to be tied to the other loop in a simple square knot. So I'm going to put it under the loop, and then I'll put it over itself, make an X, and pull that through the loop to make another simple square knot. Now those will stay together. Now all you need to do is shimmy your pouch off of the board. Try not to bend the boards too much because they will be reused. After you pulled your pouch off the board, you'll have all of these extra fringes where we tied them all together, starting a new string. The last step is to flip your pouch inside out. By doing that, you hide all the extra fringes. And now you've made a little pouch.